The lawyer's office smelled like dust and old paper, the kind of place where endings were processed like paperwork. I sat between worn leather chairs, trying to ignore the way Eric's leg bounced beside me. He was relaxed, smug even, like he already knew what was coming. Mom sat on the other side of the room, eyes puffy, clutching a tissue like it could rewind time. The reading began without ceremony. Per the final amended will of Charles William Hargrove. I stopped hearing the rest when the words entire estate and, to Eric, landed like hammer strikes. The house, the land, the savings, all of it. Gone in a paragraph. I felt my breath catch, like someone had slapped me without moving. Eric didn't react, just nodded once, like this was always how it was supposed to be. My name came next, an afterthought. And to his youngest child, Alex, his dog, Max, and personal effects listed in the second appendix. A pause. Then a smaller envelope was handed to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in my father's tight script. Take care of him. He always loved you best. That was it. No explanation. No justification. No mention of the 20 years I'd spent trying to bridge the distance between us. Just a dying dog and a note. I folded the paper slowly and slid it back into the envelope. The lawyer continued. Something about property taxes and deed transfers. I wasn't listening anymore. Max was 11 now. He'd been limping badly the last time I visited. The vet had used the word months. Eric stood up when it ended, shook the lawyer's hand like they'd closed a business deal. You okay? He asked with that grin he'd worn since we were kids, crooked, condescending, cruel. I didn't answer. I just walked out into the parking lot, envelope in hand, heart full of questions no one had ever tried to answer. I'd come expecting closure. Instead, I got confirmation. The house may have been my father's, but the betrayal was ours to share. Max would be waiting at home. I hoped he was having a good day. Eric was always the golden one, the firstborn, the favorite, the center of every conversation. He walked into a room, and the air bent around him, like gravity shifted just to keep him upright. I was the quiet one, the mistake my mother hadn't planned for, and my father didn't quite know what to do with. From the beginning, it was clear who mattered more. When Eric failed his math exam in 8th grade, Dad blamed the teacher. When I got straight A's, they said, well, it's different for you. You don't have the same pressure. Pressure. That was the word they used for his temper, too. When he punched a hole in the drywall after Mom told him no, it was pressure. When he shoved me into the bookshelf hard enough to split my lip, it was a phase. I remember the taste of blood and the silence that followed. Dad patched the wall. Mom made lasagna that night. No one talked about it. No one ever did. That was the way our family worked. Denial dressed as normalcy. Eric could do no wrong, because acknowledging the truth would mean facing their own failure. Easier to make me the problem, the sensitive one, the overreactor. At school, teachers said I was mature for my age. At home, I was told I was difficult, moody, too quiet. When I tried to tell them what Eric said to me behind closed doors, they told me not to provoke him. You know how he gets, they'd say, as if it was my job to manage his storms. I stopped trying eventually. Learned to avoid the ignition points, dodged the landmines. Became an expert in silence. The kind of silence that taught me to read a room in seconds, to know when a door creaked open whether it would bring kindness or cruelty. By the time I left for college, the house didn't feel like home. It felt like a stage where I'd played the wrong character in someone else's story. Eric still calls me kid, even now, like I'm the one who never grew up. But I remember everything. Every bruise that faded, every apology I never got. And now he has the estate, the land, the family name. I have Max. And a note that said the dog loved me best. Maybe that's enough for now. It took less than a week for the cracks to show. I requested a copy of the full estate file. Something didn't sit right. The will had been changed 9 months before my father died. Quietly. No public notice. No family conversation. Just a sudden rewrite, tucked in among the medical records from his second stroke. The original will split everything evenly between Eric and me. 50-50. I saw it years ago when Dad first drafted it back, when he still believed in fairness. But the final version was different. It named Eric as sole beneficiary. My name was only mentioned in the appendix, next to the dog and a pair of antique cufflinks I'd never seen. I called the attorney listed on the paperwork. She was polite, clipped, and cautious. Mr. Hargrove was of sound mind at the time, she said. He was clear in his intentions. Intentions that no one had ever heard out loud. Not even Mom. When I asked her about it, she blinked twice and reached for her tea like it had suddenly gone cold. It was your father's decision, she said. He and Eric talked a lot during those months. And you didn't? I wanted to ask. But her eyes wouldn't meet mine. And I already knew the answer. She didn't fight it because she didn't want to. Passive complicity. The kind that feels like betrayal, only after you've cataloged all the silences. I stood on the porch that day, holding the unsigned copy of the original will in my hand, watching the sun set behind the trees Dad once called the bones of the land. My bank account was almost empty. I was freelance writing contracts, teaching workshops, stringing it together month by month. The inheritance would have changed everything. A chance to breathe, maybe finally buy a place of my own. Start over. But instead, Eric got the keys, and I got what was left behind. And maybe that's the point. In this family, you didn't inherit security. You inherited messes. And the job of cleaning them up. The vet's office was cold in that sterile way that always reminded me of hospital stew, much white, too many laminated posters of happy pets that didn't look like Max. He sat beside me, panting softly. One paw curled under, eyes a little cloudy now. He was 11, maybe older. We never knew for sure. It's cancer, the vet said gently. Bone. Aggressive. There's not much we can do beyond managing pain. A few months, maybe. I nodded slowly, like the words made sense, though my brain was already somewhere else calculating costs, trying to remember how much was left on my credit card. He's still eating, I said. Still wants to walk. The vet gave me that practiced expression I'd come to recognize, the one that said yes, but not for long. I paid for the visit in small bills and a debit card that nearly declined. Back home, Max curled into his favorite spot by the window, the one where the light hits the rug around noon. I sat next to him, ran my hand over the soft place behind his ears. He looked up, thumped his tail once, and rested his head in my lap. I didn't cry. Not then. The inheritance would have covered everything's, specialists, meds, mobility gear, a few extra months, a chance to make it easy for him. But that wasn't an option. Not for me. I was paycheck to paycheck now, hustling side work and scraping by. But I wasn't going to let Max die just because I couldn't afford the comfort. I'd take on more work, sell some gear, cut corners. Whatever it took. Because Max wasn't just a dog. He was the only thing in this family that had ever loved me without condition. No power plays, no manipulation, just loyalty. Every night since the funeral, he'd slept beside my bed, like he knew I needed the company more than ever. I wasn't going to give up on him, not when everyone else already had. In this house, Max was the only living thing that still remembered who I was before they broke me down. And for that, I'd fight. The message came late on a Tuesday night. I was eating leftover rice on the couch, Max asleep at my feet, when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years. Cousin Lily. We hadn't talked since Grandma's funeral. Maybe longer. I'm sorry about what happened, her message read. If you ever want to know the real story, I'm here. I stared at the screen for a long time, rereading those words like they might shift or change under the light. Then I called her, no point in waiting. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was quiet, like she'd already decided this was a mistake. Your dad didn't want to change the will, she said. He was scared. I asked of what? Silence. Then, Eric came to visit a lot those last few months. Always alone. I was helping your mom sort prescriptions one day. She was overwhelmed, needed the help, and I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Your dad sounded trapped, like he was trying to reason with a loaded gun. I pressed her for more. She hesitated. I don't know what Eric had on him, but it wasn't just about inheritance. It was leverage. Your dad said something like, "This stays between us, or everything unravels." Then the will got changed. Quietly. I thanked her. She apologized again. Said she hadn't come forward sooner because no one in this family likes a whistleblower. When the call ended, I sat in the dark, letting the weight of it settle. It wasn't just favoritism or legacy. It was fear. Coercion. My father hadn't chosen Eric out of trust. He'd done it out of desperation. And now the pieces were moving. I just didn't know what the game was yet. But I was done playing defense. Something was rotten at the root, and Lily had just handed me the first shovel. The first warning came from Mrs. Donnelly, the tenant who'd rented the farmhouse behind the orchard for the past 23 years. I found her voicemail after work. Trembling. Angry. Almost in tears. He says I've got 30 days to vacate, that he's redeveloping the parcel. Said it's just business, but this is my home. Please talk to him. I didn't need to call her back. I already knew. Eric had plans. I drove past the property that weekend. Sure enough, new stakes had been driven into the soil. Orange spray paint marked tree lines. A real estate sign leaned against the fence with the words, "Future Development Site," barely covered in tarp. Condos. Of course. That land had been in our family for over a century. It was part of the original homestead black soil. Split-rail fences. The ghost of a barn, still standing like bones in the grass. My father used to say, "Some things in this family are worth protecting, even when it costs you." I hadn't understood that when I was younger. But standing there, watching the wind ripple through the tall grass, I did. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about erasure. If Eric had his way, he'd level everything that didn't serve him. Turn heritage into asphalt and profit. I went home and pulled out every box my father had left behind the records. The deeds. The old ledgers kept in faded folders. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, but I knew something didn't add up. You don't coerce a dying man to change his will unless you're hiding something worth more than square footage. The more I read, the more inconsistencies I found. Missing signatures. Handwritten amendments in someone else's pen. A letter from an appraiser that contradicted the estate value filed with the county. It was small, but it was enough. Enough to know that this wasn't clean. Eric had his grip around the throat of the family name, and he was squeezing. But he wasn't counting on me digging this deep. He thought I was still the quiet one. The invisible one. He'd forgotten who taught me how to pay attention. I found the box while helping Mom clean out the attic knot that she'd asked. Exactly. She just stood in the doorway and said, "Take what you want. The rest will go to Eric." It was buried under blankets in a plastic bin marked Christmas, even though the only thing inside that glittered was dust. Old envelopes, some still sealed. Legal pads with grocery lists. A stained blue notebook I recognized instantly, Sam's journal. Sam had been our caretaker for almost 30 years. Fixed the plumbing. Pruned the trees. Took care of the house like it was his own. He died 2 winters ago, just after Dad's second stroke. I'd always liked Sam. He talked to me like I was part of the family, even when mine didn't. I flipped through the pages, expecting repair notes, maybe schedules. Instead, I found entries, fragments of thought. Quiet alarm. Eric came by again. Another meeting with Charles and that slick lawyer. Can't say why, but I don't like it. A few pages later, Charles changed after the hospital. He's not himself. Jumpy. Quiet. Keeps talking about fixing things before it's too late. The handwriting was steady, deliberate. Sam wasn't a dramatic man. If he wrote it down, he meant it. He said he hid the real paper somewhere safe. Didn't trust anyone to do the right thing after he was gone. The date was 3 weeks before the will was revised. My stomach turned. I read the line again. A document. Hidden. Somewhere safe. I closed the notebook and slid it into my backpack without a word. Mom was downstairs, clinking dishes with the same distant detachment she'd worn since the funeral. She didn't ask what I found. She never asked anything anymore. Back at my place, I laid the journal next to the estate folders and stared at the entries for hours. Sam had always known more than he let on. He'd seen the pressure Eric was applying. And now, even in death, he'd left me a trail. One line stayed with me as I drifted to sleep. If anything happens, tell Alex to check the shed. He always liked that place. I hadn't been in the shed since I was a kid. But suddenly, I knew where I was going next. The garden shed was exactly as I remembered, tilted slightly to one side, door swollen with humidity, the smell of cedar and oil lingering in the corners. My father used to call it his quiet space, which really meant the only place in the world where he wasn't being talked over. Inside, everything was frozen in time. Rusted tools hung neatly on the walls, jars of nails still labeled in his handwriting, a lathe he hadn't touched in years resting beneath a faded tarp. I ran my hand along the floorboards, remembering the nights I'd sit and watch him carve scraps of walnut into bowls, the air warm with the scent of sawdust and old jazz crackling from a radio. Sam's note had said, "Somewhere safe." My father wasn't a complicated man, but he was thorough. I found it under the bench in the back, 3 loose floorboards, nailed at the edges but slightly uneven. I pried them up with a flathead screwdriver and found a rusted safe no bigger than a toolbox. The lock was old school. No keypad. Just a combination dial. I closed my eyes and tried the first number that came to mind. My birthday. Nothing. Then his. March 12. A soft click. The lid groaned open. Inside, time had been preserved. An unsigned draft of his original will, dated 6 months before the official version. Same equal split. Same language about legacy and fairness. But next to it was what mattered more. A stack of handwritten notes, folded in half and labeled, "In case something happens." One page described pressure. Another, fear. My father wrote that Eric had come to him with threats about something that could ruin everything if it got out. He never said what exactly. Just that he felt trapped. If you're reading this, one line read, "Then, I didn't get to fix it, but I tried." At the bottom of the stack was a USB drive, black, unmarked. I plugged it into my laptop the second I got home. Security footage. Several clips, time-stamped from the weeks before the will change. My father arguing with Eric in the living room. Eric slamming a door. One grainy clip showed the lawyer arriving through the back entrance at night. No paperwork. No witnesses. No damn ethics. My heart raced. They'd rewritten his legacy in secret, but now I had the truth. And proof. I met Lily at the diner off Route 12. The one with the cracked leather booths and the smell of burnt coffee baked into the walls. She was already there when I arrived, tapping her spoon against a mug like it might stir up courage. "You found something," she said. I slid the journal across the table, then the safe's contents. She read without speaking, eyes widening only when she reached the part about the footage. "Jesus," she whispered. "You were right." We sat in silence for a long time. Eventually, she reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. "Dad's old accountant," she said. "Still lives in town. Used to work with your father, too. Name's Tom Redding." I met Tom 2 days later at his home office. A converted sunroom filled with paper stacks and framed photos of long-dead clients. He was sharp for his age, watchful, patient. The kind of man who kept records long after anyone remembered why. "Your dad was a good man," he said. "But not always a careful one." I told him everything. The will. The footage. The notes. He listened, nodded slowly, then opened a drawer and pulled out a file labeled Hargrove, Private. Inside, tax filings, donation receipts, and a flagged memo. He was being audited, Tom said. Started just after his second stroke. Something about undeclared trust income. Not a huge deal on its own, but he hesitated. There was chatter about a discretionary account in Barbados. Never confirmed it, but it would have been messy. He handed me another slip, a photocopy of a letter handwritten, unsigned. It referenced an arrangement made after my mother's miscarriage in '89, mentioned a woman's name I didn't recognize. An affair? I asked. Possibly, Tom said. Your father told me once off the record that if certain things ever came out, it would burn everything down. The pieces were falling into place. Eric had found something. Something personal, or financial, or both. He hadn't earned the estate. He'd extorted it. Lily looked shaken when I told her, but her voice didn't waver. So, what do we do now? She asked. I glanced at the USB drive on the table. We stopped playing by their rules, because now I had leverage of my own. Max stopped eating that morning. He didn't cry, didn't whimper, just looked at me with those dark, tired eyes, and I knew. I called the vet, canceled my meetings, and loaded him gently into the back seat with a blanket and his old red collar. We didn't go to the clinic. We went to the lake. The one behind the old mill pond, where my dad used to take us fishing before things got complicated. Before life calcified into inheritance wars and silent dinners in rooms full of unsaid things. Max had always loved it there. The water, the smells, the quiet. I carried him down the path, knees buckling under his weight. He didn't resist. Just rested his head against my chest, like he was already halfway gone. I found a spot under the same tree where we'd taken that photo, 7 years old, arms around his neck, gap-toothed and sunburned. I sat with him there for hours. No phone, no noise, just wind and water and time stretching long and slow. I fed him tiny pieces of chicken from my hand, wiped his drool with the corner of my sleeve. When he started to tremble, I wrapped him in my coat. It's okay, buddy, I whispered. You can rest now. His breathing slowed, then stopped. No struggle, no sound, just stillness. I buried my face in his fur, let the silence wrap around us like fog. I didn't cry right away. Grief came in pulses. I sat there until the sky turned pink and the shadows grew long. When I finally stood, I felt different. Lighter in one way, heavier in another. Max had been more than a dog. He was my witness. My reminder that love, real love, doesn't manipulate. Doesn't threaten. It just stays, even when the rest of the world disappears. That night, I lit a candle by the window and placed Max's collar beside it. Then, I opened my laptop and made a list, a plan. The documents, the footage, the conversations. Because I wasn't just mourning anymore. I was done watching this family rot from the inside. While everyone smiled for holiday cards, Max had kept me grounded. Now I owed it to him and to myself to finish what my father couldn't. Eric agreed to meet at the estate. Not because he was nervous, was never that self-aware, but because he liked being in control of the setting. The house looked the same as it had during the funeral. Manicured lawn, cold windows, no soul. He poured himself a drink before I'd even sat down. So? He asked, voice casual. What's this about? I slid the USB across the table. Watch it. He didn't, just smirked, leaned back in that leather chair like a king, humoring a jester. Is this your big move, Alex? Going to dig through Dad's junk until something sticks? It already stuck. I pulled out the caretaker's journal. Sam saw everything. So did the security cameras. You pressured him. Lied to the lawyer. And I have a copy of the real will. That got his attention. For half a second, his eyes flickered. Then he laughed. Do you think any of that holds up in court? A dead man's journal? A draft with no signature? Some blurry footage of a family argument? He stood up, towering over me, drink still in hand. No one believes you. You're the family disappointment. You always have been. You think a sad story and a dying dog are going to change that? I stayed seated. Let him talk. Let him believe. You don't have the money to fight me. Or the name. You walk into a courtroom, they'll see exactly what I see. Some broke, bitter kid clinging to scraps. He leaned in close. So, go ahead. Take your shot. You'll lose. I didn't flinch. Maybe. Or maybe I don't need court. His smirk faltered, just barely. What does that mean? I stood. Picked up the USB. It means you've built your life on secrets. And I'm about to shine a very bright light. He watched me walk out. Didn't follow. Didn't call. He thought I was bluffing. But the thing about people like Eric, they always assume the quiet ones don't have teeth. He'd just forgotten who taught me how to bite. The plan took 3 days. Not out of hesitation, just precision. I made burner accounts, masked IPs, used encrypted cloud drives and scheduled sends. By the time it hit, everything was already in motion. At 6:00 a.m. sharp, Eric's boss received an email with the subject line, "Concerning character and misuse of inherited assets." Inside, links to footage of late-night meetings with the family lawyer, excerpts from the caretaker's journal, a draft of the original will, and one line from my father's notes, "I'm doing this under pressure. I don't know how to stop him." At 6:15, the town council got theirs. Focused more on the development plan's violations of heritage land use codes, testimonies from displaced tenants, a scanned letter from my father expressing his wishes for preservation. Then came the extended family. A collective email with bullet points, timelines, embedded clips. I knew how gossip worked in this bloodline's low burn, fast explosion. By 7:00 a.m., the editor of the Mapleton Gazette received a fully anonymous tip, complete with supporting documents, and a short message. "If you care about this town's legacy, you'll follow the money." They did. By noon, the online version had gone live. Local heir accused of inheritance fraud and land scheme. Eric's photo, taken from a corporate headshot, was cropped next to a blurry screenshot from the security footage. The piece didn't use my name. I'd made sure of that. Just called me a family source with direct access to estate documents. The emails started rolling in around 1:00 p.m., first from distant cousins, then old neighbors, then tenants. "I always knew something was off," one wrote. Another said, "Thank you for standing up." I didn't answer any of them. Just watched the story ripple outward like a stone tossed into still water. Eric tried damage control. Released a statement about miscommunication during a time of grief. But it didn't land. The visuals were too strong, the narrative too tight. He'd always thought his reputation was made of steel. But steel rusts, especially when you pretend it's gold. I wasn't done. Not yet. But the silence around him was growing louder. And this time, I wasn't the one being ignored. By the end of the week, the family lawyer's name disappeared from his firm's website. No press release, no farewell statement. Just gone. Disbarred quietly. Stripped of license, wrapped in non-disclosure, sealed under professional misconduct. He wasn't the story they never are. Just another man who thought no one was paying attention. But I was. And the Board of Ethics had listened. Eric, on the other hand, couldn't vanish so easily. By Monday, a formal investigation had been opened. Elder coercion, fraud, will tampering. I read the charges in the court notice without blinking. The injunction followed quickly, a full freeze on the estate until further review. No land sales, no transfers, no financial disbursements. For the first time since the funeral, Eric's hands were off the wheel. I didn't feel triumphant, just clear. I wasn't out for revenge. I didn't want headlines or public humiliation. I just wanted the truth to have weight. I wanted someone to say, "You were right. You were never crazy, or difficult, or overreacting." I wanted my name back from the pit they'd tried to bury it in. Mom didn't call. No one from that side of the family did. Lily checked in every few days, mostly to send news clips or legal updates. "It's unraveling," she said once. "Piece by piece." I nodded. That was always how it happened. Slowly, then all at once. I still hadn't told anyone about the night I sat with Max by the lake. That moment felt too sacred, too untouched by the fallout. But I did talk to him sometimes in my head, on walks, in the quiet pockets of morning. Told him what was happening. Told him we were close. Some nights, I imagined him sitting by the window again, tail thumping once, like he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he always had. What mattered now was finishing the work. Not burning it down but clearing it out. Rebuilding with something honest. The courtroom was half full the day the settlement came through. Eric sat with a lawyer I didn't recognize, dressed in his usual arrogance, disguised as confidence. He didn't look at me once. The judge summarized the findings in a voice that was all procedure. No poetry. Undue influence. Invalid amendment. Restoration of original intent. The estate would be split even per the draft. Per the truth. Eric protested, of course. Claimed character assassination. Claimed victimhood. But the footage, the journal, the notarized statements from the tenants, none of it left room for doubt. The judge wasn't interested in theatrics, just signatures, stamps, closure. When it ended, I walked out without waiting. Didn't shake hands. Didn't look back. The land was mine now, me half anyway. Enough acres to do something real. Something good. I hired local contractors. Cleaned up the old Donnelly property. Filed permits. Bought a few rescue kennels. Word spread fast, people wanted to help. Donations came in. Volunteers. A local vet offered to waive half her fees. We called it Max's Field. Not a memorial. A promise. A place where animals could live out their days safe, seen, and loved exactly the way he did. I still had the collar. Still kept it on a hook by the door. When we opened that fall, a soft rain fell across the hillside. The first dog through the gate was missing a leg, but ran like nothing could stop him. I watched him from the porch, hand resting on the railing, the smell of pine and wet grass in the air. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a bystander in my own life. I'd never wanted the money. Not really. I wanted to breathe, without proving my worth. To stop apologizing for being the one who remembered things that hurt. To build something with my name on it, not because I needed the world to know it, but because I needed to. Justice wasn't loud. It was steady, patient, and when it finally came, it didn't roar. It just felt right. 1 year later, the land looks different. Softer somehow. Like it finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. My house sits at the edge of a sloping pasture, where the grass rolls like waves when the wind picks up. There's a porch with chipped paint I still haven't bothered to fix, a swing Max would have loved, and a view that turns gold every evening just before the sun disappears. Inside, the walls are quiet, but full-lined with shelves of donated blankets, framed photos of animals who found a second chance, and hand-scrawled thank you notes from kids who come by on weekends to help feed the horses. There's a mutt named Baxter who sleeps on the couch like he owns it. A blind tabby who follows my voice around the kitchen, and a goat named Cricket who still tries to chew through the fence every morning like it's her job. It's chaos. It's peace. I built this place with my own hands, with what they left me, what they tried to keep. There are days I still hear echoes of the past. Eric's voice sneering in a courtroom, my mother's silence heavy across the phone line, the sound of Dad's boots across the old shed floor. But they don't haunt me anymore. They're just part of the history I no longer carry on my back. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Max hadn't been in the will, if I'd walked away like they probably expected me to. But then I remember the weight of him in my arms, the way he looked at me like I was the only thing that ever made sense. And I know the truth. I wasn't left with nothing. I was left with a reason. That dog gave me more than they ever did. He gave me the thread I followed out of the dark. I walk the fence line each morning before the sun fully rises, coffee in hand, boots damp with dew. The animals stir behind me, slowly waking to another day. And every time I turn toward the house, I feel it again, that quiet knowing, that steady certainty that I didn't just survive them. I outlived the story they tried to write for me. Voiceover. My family gave me a dying dog. But what they didn't realize was that Max gave me everything: loyalty, courage, and the truth. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.